"Oh my God, they killed Kenny." It's a phrase that's echoed through pop culture for over 2 decades. But have you ever stopped to wonder what lies beneath that iconic catchphrase? Tonight, we're diving deep into the rabbit hole of South Park theories, where nothing is quite as simple as it seems, and every joke might hide a darker truth. Welcome to South Park, Colorado. Population 4,000 something, depending on how many people died that week. On the surface, it's just another small mountain town where four foul-mouthed kids get into increasingly absurd adventures. But dig a little deeper, and you'll discover a place where the impossible happens daily, where government conspiracies unfold in elementary school cafeterias, and where a talking towel can somehow become a voice of reason. What makes South Park so uniquely fascinating from a theory perspective isn't just the wild events that occur, but the underlying consistency of its madness. Trey Parker and Matt Stone didn't just create a cartoon. They built an entire universe with its own rules, its own logic, and most importantly, its own secrets. These aren't just random gags thrown together for shock value. There's a method to the madness, patterns in the chaos, and connections that span decades of storytelling. Think about it. What are the odds that one small Colorado town would experience alien invasions, demonic possessions, time travel incidents, parallel dimensions, underground civilizations, and governmental cover-ups all within the span of a few years? Either South Park has the worst luck in recorded history, or there's something fundamentally special about this place that attracts the extraordinary. The beauty of South Park theories lies in how the show has always operated on multiple levels simultaneously. On one level, it's satirizing current events and social issues with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. On another level, it's telling deeply personal stories about friendship, growing up, and finding your place in an increasingly complex world. But on a third, often overlooked level, it's building a mythology that's as intricate as any science fiction epic. Consider the show's approach to continuity. While South Park is famous for its standalone episodes that reset the status quo, there are underlying threads that have been weaving through the series since the very beginning. Kenny's deaths and resurrections weren't just running gags. They were building toward a cosmic revelation about his true nature. Randy Marsh's evolution from concerned geologist to, well, whatever Randy is now, follows a trajectory that makes perfect sense when you step back and look at the bigger picture. The creators have always been remarkably honest about their creative process, often discussing episodes and commentary tracks and interviews. But here's what's interesting. They've also admitted that sometimes they don't fully understand the implications of what they've created until years later. Plot threads that seemed like throwaway jokes in Season 3 suddenly become crucial plot points in Season 15. Characters who appear to be one-off gags return with expanded roles that retroactively give their earlier appearances new meaning. This creates a unique situation for theory crafting. Unlike shows where everything is meticulously planned from the beginning, South Park's organic development means that patterns and connections can emerge naturally over time. The creators' willingness to embrace and expand upon fan interpretations has created a feedback loop where the audience's theories sometimes influence the direction of the show itself. What we're going to explore together over the next hour isn't just wild speculation, though there will certainly be plenty of that. We're going to look at the evidence, examine the patterns, and try to understand the deeper truths that South Park has been telling us all along. Some of these theories have been floating around fan communities for years. Others are more recent revelations that cast earlier episodes in entirely new light. We'll journey from the cosmic implications of Kenny's immortality to the underground civilizations lurking beneath the town's surface. We'll examine why the government seems so interested in South Park's affairs, and whether certain characters know more about the town's true nature than they're letting on. We'll explore the possibility that South Park exists in a dimensional nexus where the normal rules of reality don't quite apply. But perhaps most importantly, we'll look at the meta-narrative that South Park has been building. The idea that this isn't just a cartoon about four kids, but a commentary on the nature of media, reality, and our place in an increasingly surreal world. After all, in a show where the characters have met their creators, where real-world events are immediately incorporated into the fictional narrative, And where the fourth wall is more of a suggestion than a barrier, the line between fiction and reality becomes fascinatingly blurred. So settle in, get comfortable, and prepare to see South Park in a whole new light. Whether you're a longtime fan who's seen every episode multiple times, or someone who's only familiar with the basics, there's something here for everyone. We're going to take our time, explore these ideas thoroughly, and hopefully uncover some truths that have been hiding in plain sight all along. Because in South Park, nothing is ever quite what it seems, and sometimes the most outrageous theories turn out to be the most accurate ones. After all, this is a show where a giant guinea pig can terrorize a city, where Christmas can literally come to life and fight Satan, and where the fate of imagination itself can hang in the balance of a children's custody battle. Welcome to the deeper mysteries of South Park. Let's begin. Of all the mysteries that South Park has presented us over the years, none is quite as persistent or as unsettling as the case of Kenny McCormick. Sure, we all know the running gag. Kenny dies, everyone forgets. Kenny comes back the next episode like nothing happened. It's been the show's most reliable source of dark humor since the very beginning. But what if I told you that Kenny's death and resurrection cycle is far more than just a running gag? What if it's actually the key to understanding something much larger about the nature of reality in South Park? Let's start with what we know for certain. Kenny dies. A lot. We're talking about hundreds of deaths across the series, ranging from the mundane to the absolutely ridiculous. He's been crushed, exploded, shot, eaten, frozen, electrocuted, and subjected to pretty much every form of demise imaginable. But here's where things get interesting. Kenny remembers every single death. This isn't speculation. It's been confirmed multiple times throughout the series. In the Mysterian trilogy, we see Kenny's frustration with his situation laid bare. He's trapped in an endless cycle of death and rebirth, watching his friends forget him over and over again, unable to break free from what he describes as a curse. But what kind of curse could possibly have this kind of power? And more importantly, why Kenny? The answer might lie in Kenny's family background, specifically their involvement with the cult of Cthulhu. Now, before you dismiss this as just another one of South Park's random pop culture references, consider the implications. Kenny's parents, Stuart and Carol McCormick, are active members of this cult, which worships the cosmic entity Cthulhu from H.P. Lovecraft's mythos. This isn't just mentioned in passing. It's a recurring element that becomes crucial during the Cthulhu trilogy of episodes. During those episodes, we learn that Kenny's connection to Cthulhu goes far deeper than just his parents' religious affiliations. When Cthulhu rises from the depths, Kenny is the only one who can communicate with the ancient entity. More than that, Kenny becomes Cthulhu's chosen companion, riding on the creature's back as it destroys entire cities. This isn't the behavior of a random kid who just happens to be immortal. This is the behavior of someone who has a cosmic significance that we're only beginning to understand. But let's dig deeper into the mechanics of Kenny's immortality. Every time Kenny dies, he's reborn the next day to his mother, Carol. She goes through a full pregnancy and birth cycle overnight. And by morning, there's Kenny again, the same age he was when he died, with all his memories intact. This isn't resurrection in the traditional sense. This is reality being rewritten to accommodate Kenny's continued existence. Think about the implications of that. Reality itself bends around Kenny McCormick. The universe literally cannot function without him in it. His friends forget his deaths, not because of some supernatural memory wipe, but because their minds can't process the contradiction of Kenny being dead and alive simultaneously. It's easier for their brains to just forget. This raises a terrifying possibility. What if Kenny isn't just immortal? What if he's something far more significant? Some fans have theorized that Kenny is actually a cosmic entity himself, possibly an avatar or incarnation of death itself. This would explain why he's so comfortable around Cthulhu, why reality bends to keep him alive, and why his deaths often serve as catalysts for major events in South Park. Consider the orange parka that Kenny wears. Yes, it muffles his speech and makes him difficult to understand. But what if that's intentional? What if Kenny's voice contains power that's too dangerous to be heard clearly? In many mythologies, The true names and voices of cosmic entities have reality-altering properties. Maybe Kenny's parka isn't just a fashion choice. Maybe it's a necessary restraint. There's also the question of why Kenny's deaths often coincide with supernatural events in South Park. He dies just before alien invasions, demonic possessions, and reality-bending incidents. Is this coincidence, or is Kenny's death somehow triggering these events? Maybe each death serves as a kind of cosmic reset button, allowing reality to be temporarily malleable enough for extraordinary things to happen. The Mysterian persona adds another layer to this mystery. When Kenny becomes Mysterian, he's not just playing superhero. He's actively investigating the supernatural underbelly of South Park. He knows things that the other boys don't, sees connections that others miss. It's as if his immortality has given him access to information that transcends normal human understanding. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of Kenny's situation is what it suggests about free will. If Kenny is trapped in an endless cycle of death and rebirth, if reality rewrites itself to keep him alive, then what does that say about the nature of choice in the South Park universe? Are any of the characters truly in control of their destinies? Or are they all just playing out roles in some cosmic script? Some theories suggest that Kenny's immortality is the price paid for South Park's existence as a nexus point for supernatural activity. Maybe his deaths and rebirths are what keep the dimensional barriers thin enough for all the weird stuff to happen. Maybe Kenny isn't cursed. Maybe he's the guardian, the sentinel who keeps watch over a town that exists at the intersection of multiple realities. This would explain why Kenny seems to have knowledge of events that haven't happened yet, why he's often the first to recognize supernatural threats, and why his presence is so crucial to the group's survival. Stan, Kyle, and Cartman might be the main characters from our perspective, but Kenny might be the most important character from a cosmic perspective. The truth about Kenny McCormick might be far stranger and more significant than we ever imagined. And if that's the case, then every "oh my god, they killed Kenny" isn't just a punchline. It's a herald of something much bigger coming to South Park. Few questions have captivated South Park fans quite like the mystery of Eric Cartman's paternity. While the show officially resolved this storyline years ago, revealing that Cartman's mother, Leanne, is actually his father due to being a hermaphrodite, many fans remain unsatisfied with this explanation. And honestly, when you really dig into the details, there are plenty of reasons to suspect that the truth about Cartman's parentage might be far more complex than what we've been told. Let's start by revisiting the original mystery. The Who is Eric's father? Two-parter was one of South Park's earliest attempts at serialized storytelling. It was brilliant in its execution. The reveal that practically every man in town had been with Leanne Cartman wasn't just a joke about her promiscuity. It was a statement about the moral decay of South Park's adult population. But here's what's interesting. The resolution felt rushed, almost like the writers were trying to close the book on something they didn't want to explore further. Think about the logistics of the hermaphrodite explanation. We're supposed to believe that Leanne Cartman somehow impregnated herself. Even if we accept the biological possibility, the timeline doesn't quite add up. Cartman has distinct personality traits and intellectual capabilities that seem to come from somewhere beyond just Leanne's genetics. Where did his strategic cunning come from? His manipulation skills? His unusual charisma when he wants to use it? There's something almost supernatural about Eric Cartman's abilities. This is a fourth grader who has successfully orchestrated elaborate revenge schemes, manipulated world leaders, started his own religious movement, and convinced an entire town to participate in his various schemes. That's not normal child behavior. That's the behavior of someone with an almost preternatural understanding of human psychology and social dynamics. Some fans have theorized that Cartman's real father might be someone far more significant than just another South Park resident. What if his father is connected to the government agencies that frequently intervene in South Park's affairs? This would explain Cartman's occasional flashes of insider knowledge about various conspiracies and his ability to manipulate situations to his advantage. It would also explain why he seems to have resources and capabilities that far exceed what a poor kid from a broken home should have access to. Consider Cartman's relationship with authority figures throughout the series. While he often clashes with teachers and police officers, he has an unusual ability to charm his way out of serious consequences. Even when he's caught red-handed in elaborate schemes, he somehow manages to avoid lasting punishment. Is this just plot armor, or is there someone behind the scenes protecting him? There's also the question of Cartman's intelligence. Yes, he's often portrayed as ignorant and lazy, but he's also capable of incredible strategic thinking when he's motivated. He's mastered multiple languages when it suited his purposes, demonstrated advanced understanding of economics and marketing, and shown an almost savant-like ability to read and manipulate people. This kind of selective genius often runs in families. So where did it come from? The hermaphrodite explanation also conveniently sidesteps the question of why Leon never talks about Cartman's conception or early childhood. Most parents have stories about their children's early years, but Leanne seems to have very few memories of Cartman as a baby or toddler. What if that's because Cartman didn't have a normal childhood? What if he was raised, at least partially, by someone else? Some of the more outlandish theories suggest that Cartman might be the product of a government breeding program designed to create individuals with enhanced manipulation abilities. This would explain his psychological profile, his resistance to normal social conditioning, and his ability to thrive in chaotic situations. It would also explain why he seems to know things about the adult world that no normal child should know. Then there's the supernatural angle to consider. South Park has established that various cosmic and demonic entities take an interest in the town's affairs. What if Cartman's conception involved some kind of supernatural intervention? His ability to rally people to his cause, his resistance to normal moral development, and his almost supernatural luck in avoiding consequences all suggest that he might be more than just a regular human child. The timing of Cartman's birth is also suspicious. He appears to be the same age as Stan, Kyle, and Kenny, but his personality is so dramatically different from theirs that it raises questions about whether they actually had the same developmental experiences. What if Cartman was artificially aged or mentally conditioned to fit in with his peer group? There's also the question of genetic diversity. If Leanne really is both of Cartman's parents, where did his distinctive appearance come from? His facial structure, his body type, even his voice are quite different from his mother's. Genetics can be unpredictable, but the complete lack of resemblance is notable. Perhaps most intriguingly, Cartman occasionally demonstrates knowledge or abilities that seem to come from nowhere. He's shown familiarity with advanced technology, military tactics, and international politics that no fourth grader should possess. When pressed about where he learned these things, he usually gives vague or contradictory answers. Is he lying, or does he genuinely not remember where this knowledge came from? The official explanation of Cartman's parentage might have been designed to end speculation, but actually raises more questions than it answers. In a show where nothing is ever quite what it seems, where conspiracy and cover-up are regular themes, it's worth asking whether the truth about Eric Cartman's origins is still hidden somewhere beneath the surface. After all, in South Park, the most outrageous explanation is often just a cover story for something even more outrageous underneath. It's one of the most enduring memes to come out of South Park, a perfect satire of corporate business plans that sound impressive but lack any actual substance. But what if the Underpants Gnome's business model isn't actually as nonsensical as it appears? What if the missing step is something so significant, so world-changing, that it had to be hidden from us? Tonight, we're going to explore the possibility that the Underpants Gnomes know exactly what they're doing, and that their master plan might be the key to understanding some of South Park's deepest mysteries. First, let's consider what we actually know about the Underpants Gnomes. They're small, industrious creatures who have been operating in South Park for an unknown period of time. They have access to advanced technology, including shrinking devices and what appears to be interdimensional transportation. They've built a massive underground operation that can process and store millions of pairs of underwear. And most importantly, they're organized. This isn't a random collection of creatures stealing underwear for kicks. This is a coordinated industrial operation with clear hierarchy and purpose. The question that has puzzled fans for decades is simple. What could they possibly want with all that underwear? The standard interpretation is that it's a joke about capitalism and the absurdity of business plans that prioritize profit over logic. But what if there's something fundamentally special about underwear that we're not seeing? Consider the intimate nature of underwear. These are garments that are in constant contact with human bodies, absorbing DNA, pheromones, and other biological materials. From a scientific perspective, underwear represents one of the most comprehensive samples of human genetic and chemical information you could possibly collect. If you wanted to study humanity, to understand human biology and behavior patterns, collecting underwear would actually be an incredibly efficient method. This leads us to our first major theory. The underpants gnomes are conducting the largest anthropological study in human history. They're not just collecting fabric, they're collecting data about human biology, health, diet, stress levels, reproductive cycles, and countless other factors that could be determined through chemical analysis. The missing step might be the processing and analysis of this biological information, with the final profit being the sale of this data to interested parties. But who would be interested in purchasing this kind of information? Here's where things get really interesting. Throughout South Park's run, we've seen numerous instances of alien visitation, government experimentation, and interdimensional interference. What if the underpants gnomes are contractors, collecting human biological data for clients we haven't seen yet? The aliens who frequently abduct the citizens of South Park would certainly be interested in comprehensive human biological data. Rather than conducting individual abductions and examinations, they could simply purchase analyzed data from the underpants gnomes. It would be far more efficient and much less likely to attract attention from government agencies. Speaking of government agencies, they've shown repeated interest in South Park's supernatural activities. What if the underpants gnomes are actually a front operation for a government agency studying the town's unusual properties? The biological data they're collecting could be used to determine how exposure to South Park's supernatural events affects human physiology. Are the residents developing immunities to alien technology? Are their brain patterns being altered by repeated exposure to time travel and dimensional rifts? Then there's the interdimensional angle to consider. The underpants gnomes clearly have access to technology that allows them to move through spaces that normal humans cannot. They can shrink to microscopic size, they can appear and disappear at will, and they can transport massive quantities of material without being detected. This suggests that they're not originally from our dimension. What if the underpants gnomes are refugees from another dimension, and collecting underwear is actually their method of studying our reality to determine if it's suitable for colonization? The biological data would tell them about human health, reproduction rates, genetic diversity, and adaptability. The missing step could be the analysis that determines whether our dimension can support their population, and the final profit could be from selling our dimension to their people as a new home. There's also a more sinister possibility to consider. What if the underpants gnomes are preparing for some kind of biological warfare? The comprehensive genetic information they're collecting would allow them to develop targeted bioweapons that could affect specific populations or even individuals. In a world where genetic targeting is becoming increasingly possible, a database of human biological information would be incredibly valuable to the wrong buyers. But perhaps the most intriguing theory is that the underpants gnomes are time travelers. Think about it. They've been operating for an unknown period of time, they have access to advanced technology, and they're collecting what amounts to a comprehensive historical record of human biology. What if they're from the future, collecting genetic information that will be crucial for humanity's survival? Maybe in the future, humanity faces some kind of genetic crisis, a plague, genetic degradation, or contamination that threatens the species. The underpants gnomes could be collecting pristine genetic samples from the past to help rebuild human genetic diversity in their time. The missing step would be the preservation and cataloging of this genetic information, and the final profit would be from selling genetic restoration services to future humans. This theory would also explain their secrecy and their seemingly nonsensical business plan. If they told people they were time travelers collecting genetic samples to save humanity's future, It would create paradoxes and potentially alter the timeline. Better to let people think they're just weird little creatures with a bizarre underwear fetish. The more you think about it, the more the underpants gnomes operation makes sense. They're not random creatures with a silly business plan. They're sophisticated operators with access to advanced technology and a clear purpose. The missing step isn't a mystery because it's non-existent. It's a mystery because it's so significant that revealing it would fundamentally change our understanding of South Park's place in the cosmic order. Whatever the truth about the Underpants Gnome's master plan, one thing is certain. They're far more important to South Park's mythology than they initially appeared to be. Randy Marsh is one of South Park's most fascinating characters, and not just because of his tendency to take every situation to its most ridiculous extreme. On the surface, Randy appears to be a simple, small-town geologist who happens to have terrible judgment and an addictive personality. But when you start examining his actions and abilities throughout the series, a different picture emerges. One of a man who might be living multiple secret lives, each more complex than the last. Let's start with the most obvious example, Lord. Yes, Randy Marsh, middle-aged geologist from Colorado, became one of the world's most successful pop stars by adopting the persona of a teenage girl from New Zealand. Think about the logistics of what this required. Randy had to master singing, songwriting, music production, and international marketing. He had to develop an entirely different personality and maintain it consistently across multiple media appearances. He had to coordinate with record labels, booking agents, and publicity teams. This isn't something you just stumble into. This is the work of someone with serious organizational and creative abilities. But the lore revelation raises bigger questions about Randy's other activities. If he could successfully maintain such an elaborate double life as an international pop star, what else might he be hiding? His official job as a geologist already gives him unusual access to information about South Park's underground activities, environmental changes, and geological anomalies. In a town where supernatural events frequently involve changes to the physical landscape, a geologist would be perfectly positioned to monitor and potentially cover up evidence. Consider Randy's various business ventures throughout the series. He's been involved in alcohol production, marijuana cultivation, and numerous other enterprises that seem to spring up overnight. Where does he get the capital for these ventures? Where does he acquire the expertise? Randy's not independently wealthy, and his geological work doesn't typically lead to entrepreneurial opportunities. Yet somehow, he always seems to have the resources and knowledge necessary to launch successful businesses in completely unrelated fields. The marijuana business is particularly interesting because of its timing and scope. Randy didn't just start growing marijuana. He became one of the leading producers in Colorado almost immediately. He understood the legal framework, the agricultural requirements, the distribution networks, and the marketing strategies needed to dominate the industry. That kind of comprehensive knowledge doesn't develop overnight, which suggests Randy had been planning and preparing for marijuana legalization long before it actually happened. Some fans have theorized that Randy's geological work is actually a cover for intelligence gathering. Think about what a geologist does. They study the earth, they monitor seismic activity, they analyze soil and rock samples, they map underground formations. In a town like South Park, where underground civilizations, secret government facilities, and alien installations are common, a geologist would be the perfect cover identity for someone conducting surveillance. This theory gains credibility when you consider Randy's response to various supernatural events in South Park. While other adults typically react with confusion or denial, Randy often seems remarkably well informed about what's happening. He's one of the few adults who consistently acknowledges supernatural events rather than dismissing them or forgetting about them. This suggests he has access to information that other residents don't. There's also Randy's relationship with government agencies to consider. Throughout the series, Randy has had numerous interactions with federal agents, military personnel, and other government officials. While these interactions are often played for comedy, there's an underlying pattern of Randy being treated as someone who matters, someone whose cooperation is important. Regular small-town geologists don't typically warrant that level of attention for federal agencies. Randy's drinking problem might also be more complicated than it appears. While it's often portrayed as a weakness or character flaw, what if Randy's alcoholism is actually a coping mechanism for the stress of maintaining multiple secret identities? Living as a government agent, international pop star, and small-town father simultaneously would create enormous psychological pressure. Alcohol might be his way of compartmentalizing these different aspects of his life. The timeline of Randy's various careers also doesn't quite add up when you examine it closely. He's supposedly been working as a geologist for years, but he also had time to develop the skills necessary to become Lord, master marijuana cultivation, and maintain relationships with government agencies. Either Randy is incredibly efficient with his time, or some of these activities have been going on longer than we've been told. Some of the more elaborate theories suggest that Randy might be part of a multi-generational program designed to monitor South Park's supernatural activity. His father, Marvin Marsh, has also demonstrated unusual knowledge about the town's history and hidden activities. What if the Marsh family has been serving as guardians or monitors for generations, with each generation passing down knowledge about South Park's true nature? This would explain Randy's seemingly inexplicable knowledge about various supernatural threats, his access to resources that exceed his apparent income, and his ability to maintain multiple identities simultaneously. It would also explain why he's so protective of his family despite his often irresponsible behavior. If he knows about the cosmic dangers that regularly threaten South Park, his overprotective tendencies would make perfect sense. Randy's relationship with his son Stan might also be more complex than it appears. Throughout the series, Randy often seems to be testing Stan, putting him in situations that force him to develop problem-solving skills and resilience. What if this isn't just bad parenting, but actually a form of training? What if Randy is preparing Stan to eventually take over whatever secret responsibilities the Marsh family has been carrying? The truth about Randy Marsh might be that he's not just South Park's most chaotic resident. He might be one of its most important protectors, working behind the scenes to monitor threats and maintain the delicate balance that keeps the town from descending into complete supernatural chaos. There's something fundamentally different about South Park, Colorado. While the show's creators have always insisted it's just a small mountain town, the sheer volume of supernatural, extraterrestrial, and reality-bending events that occur there suggests something far more significant. When you start mapping out all the extraordinary incidents that have happened in this one location, a pattern emerges that's impossible to ignore. South Park isn't just unlucky, it's special. And that raises the question, what is it about this specific place that makes it such a magnet for the impossible? Let's start with the basics of South Park's geography. It's located in the Colorado Rocky Mountains, positioned at a relatively high elevation in a region known for geological instability and unusual weather patterns. But more importantly, it's isolated. The town is surrounded by mountains, forests, and largely uninhabited wilderness. This isolation makes it perfect for covering up extraordinary events, but it also suggests that the town might have been chosen specifically for its remote location. Throughout the series, South Park has experienced alien invasions, demonic possessions, time travel incidents, dimensional rifts, visits from religious figures, government experiments, underground civilizations, magical phenomena, and creatures from other realities. The statistical probability of all these events happening randomly in one small town is essentially zero. There has to be something about South Park's location that attracts or enables these phenomena. One of the most compelling theories is that South Park sits on what's known as a dimensional nexus, a point where multiple realities intersect. This would explain why beings from other dimensions, times, and realities seem to find their way there so easily. Think about how many episodes feature characters from alternate timelines, parallel dimensions, or completely different realities. If South Park exists at a point where the barriers between worlds are naturally thin, it would serve as a kind of cosmic crossroads. The dimensional nexus theory gains credibility when you consider the town's relationship with time travel. Multiple episodes have featured characters traveling through time, and the effects of these temporal manipulations often seem to center on South Park. If the town exists at a point where time flows differently or where temporal barriers are weakened, it would explain why time travel incidents are so common there. There's also the possibility that South Park was built on ancient sacred ground. Many indigenous cultures recognized certain locations as having special spiritual significance, often describing them as places where the veil between worlds was thin. The repeated appearance of spiritual and supernatural entities in South Park suggests that the land itself might have properties that attract otherworldly attention. Consider the frequency of religious and spiritual events in South Park. Jesus lives there. Satan has visited multiple times. Various other religious figures have appeared. Religious conflicts play out on a cosmic scale. This isn't typical for a small Colorado town, but it would make perfect sense if South Park were located on land that various spiritual traditions recognize as sacred or significant. The geological aspect can't be ignored either. Randy Marsh's work as a geologist has frequently put him at the center of supernatural events, suggesting that there might be something unusual about South Park's underground structure. What if there are natural geological formations beneath the town that amplify psychic energy, create dimensional instabilities, or serve as conduits for supernatural forces? Underground civilizations have repeatedly been discovered beneath South Park, from the crab people to various other subterranean societies. The sheer number of underground facilities, caverns, and civilizations suggests that the area's geological structure is unlike anywhere else. These underground spaces might be natural formations that predate human settlement, created by whatever forces make South Park special. Government interest in South Park provides another clue about the town's true nature. Federal agencies, military units, and secret government organizations repeatedly intervene in South Park's affairs. While this is often played for comedy, the pattern suggests that the government knows something about South Park that the general public doesn't. They're not just responding to incidents, they're monitoring the town, suggesting they understand its significance. The government's response to South Park's supernatural events is telling. Rather than trying to relocate the population or shut down the town, they seem focused on controlling information and managing the situation. This suggests that South Park's unusual properties are either too valuable to abandon or too dangerous to interfere with directly. There's also the matter of South Park's population. For a town that experiences such frequent catastrophic events, the population remains remarkably stable. People don't flee in terror after alien invasions or demonic possessions. They don't abandon the town after reality-bending incidents. This could be explained by memory manipulation, but it might also suggest that the town's residents are somehow selected or conditioned to remain. Some theories suggest that South Park's residents are unknowingly part of an ongoing experiment. The town could be serving as a testing ground for how humans respond to supernatural stimuli, with the population monitored and studied by various interested parties. The frequent government interventions could be part of this experimental oversight. The environmental factors around South Park also merit consideration. The town experiences unusual weather patterns, seasonal anomalies, and ecological events that seem to defy normal meteorological explanation. If South Park exists at a point where multiple realities intersect, it would naturally experience environmental instabilities as different dimensional physics interact. Climate and environmental changes in South Park often coincide with supernatural events, suggesting that the town's unusual properties affect everything from local weather to wildlife behavior. Man-bear-pig's emergence from the area isn't just a climate change metaphor. It might reflect how environmental pressures interact with South Park's dimensional instabilities. Perhaps most intriguingly, South Park seems to be aware of its own fictional nature in ways that other locations in the show aren't. Characters frequently break the fourth wall, reference their own show, and demonstrate awareness of narrative structures. If South Park exists at a nexus point between realities, it might actually exist partially in our reality, explaining this meta-awareness. The truth about South Park's location might be that it's not just a town in Colorado. It's a focal point for cosmic forces, a place where the normal rules don't apply, because reality itself is fundamentally different there. And if that's the case, then everything that happens in South Park takes on much greater significance than just the adventures of four kids in a small mountain town. Jerome Chef McElroy was more than just South Park Elementary's cafeteria cook. For nearly a decade, he served as the town's unofficial wise man, the one adult who seemed to understand both the innocence of childhood and the complexities of the adult world. But Chef's role in South Park was always more mysterious than it initially appeared. His vast knowledge of topics ranging from love and relationships to supernatural phenomena, combined with his unexplained connections to various secret organizations, suggests that there was much more to Chef than met the eye. From his very first appearance, Chef demonstrated knowledge that went far beyond what you'd expect from a school cafeteria worker. He could speak knowledgeably about psychology, sociology, history, music, and most notably, matters of the heart. When the boys came to him with questions about relationships, dating, or human sexuality, Chef always had the perfect advice, delivered with wisdom that suggested extensive life experience and formal education. Where did this knowledge come from? The most obvious explanation is Chef's background in the music industry. We know he was a recording artist who worked with major labels and famous musicians. The music business would have exposed him to diverse cultures, lifestyles, and ways of thinking. It would have given him access to information and experiences that most small-town residents never encounter. But even accounting for his musical career, Chef's knowledge base seemed unusually comprehensive. Consider Chef's familiarity with supernatural events. While other adults in South Park typically react to supernatural occurrences with confusion or denial, Chef consistently demonstrated awareness of otherworldly phenomena. He recognized supernatural threats, understood their implications, and often provided guidance on how to deal with them. This wasn't the behavior of someone encountering the supernatural for the first time. This was the behavior of someone with prior experience. Chef's connections to secret organizations became more apparent as the series progressed. He had relationships with government agents, military personnel, and various shadowy figures who would appear during South Park's more serious crises. These weren't casual acquaintances. These were people who clearly knew and trusted Chef, suggesting ongoing professional relationships that extended far beyond his work at the elementary school. The Super Adventure Club storyline revealed that Chef had been recruited by an organization that claimed to be dedicated to adventure and exploration, but was actually involved in much darker activities. While this storyline was created to write the character out of the show, it inadvertently revealed something important about Chef's background. He was the kind of person who attracted the attention of secret organizations. Groups with hidden agendas actively sought him out, suggesting he had skills, knowledge, or connections that made him valuable to their operations. But what if Chef's recruitment by the Super Adventure Club wasn't his first involvement with a secret organization? What if his entire presence in South Park was part of a longer-term assignment or mission? His role as the elementary school cook would have given him perfect cover for monitoring the town's unusual activities while maintaining close contact with the children who often found themselves at the center of supernatural events. Think about Chef's relationship with the boys. He wasn't just a friendly adult who happened to work at their school. He actively mentored them, provided guidance during crises, and seemed to take personal responsibility for their well-being. If Chef were an agent assigned to monitor South Park's supernatural activity, the boys would be perfect sources of information. They consistently found themselves involved in the town's most extraordinary events, and their regular visits to Chef would give him detailed intelligence about ongoing supernatural incidents. Chef's musical career might also have been more significant than it appeared. The entertainment industry has long been rumored to have connections to intelligence agencies, with musicians and performers serving as cultural ambassadors and information gatherers during international tours. Chef's success in the music business could have brought him to the attention of agencies looking for assets with international experience and cultural credibility. The timing of Chef's departure from the show coincides with some of South Park's most significant supernatural events. He left just as the town was experiencing increased government attention and cosmic-level incidents. This could be coincidence, but it might also suggest that Chef's mission in South Park was complete, or that his handlers decided to extract him before events escalated beyond their control. Chef's knowledge of love, and relationships might also have been more professional than personal. Intelligence agencies train their operatives in psychology, human behavior, and social manipulation. Chef's ability to understand and advise on human relationships could have been the result of formal training in behavioral analysis and social dynamics. His role as the town's relationship guru would have given him access to intimate details about the personal lives of South Park's residents, information that could be valuable for intelligence purposes. The supernatural entities that frequently visited South Park often seemed to recognize Chef or treat him with unusual respect. This suggests that Chef's reputation extended beyond the human community into otherworldly circles. If Chef were involved with organizations that monitor supernatural activity, he would naturally develop relationships with non-human entities as part of his work. Chef's kitchen at South Park Elementary might have served as more than just a food preparation area. The cafeteria was centrally located, had multiple access points, and was a natural gathering place where information flowed freely. It would have been an ideal base of operations for someone conducting surveillance or intelligence gathering. The fact that Chef was always there, always available to talk, and always well-informed about town events takes on new significance when viewed through this lens. The circumstances surrounding Isaac Hayes' departure from the show and Chef's subsequent fate in the storyline created a narrative void that was never fully filled. But rather than seeing this as an ending, we might consider the possibility that Chef's influence on South Park continued behind the scenes. Intelligence operatives rarely announce their departures, and the most effective agents are those whose true roles are never discovered. Chef's legacy in South Park isn't just his wisdom about love and relationships. It's the possibility that he represented a hidden layer of protection and monitoring that helped keep the town's supernatural chaos from spiraling completely out of control. Throughout South Park's run, one of the most consistent elements has been the frequent appearance of government agents, military personnel, and federal agencies. While these interventions are often played for comedy, there's an underlying pattern that suggests the United States government has a very specific and ongoing interest in South Park's affairs. The question isn't whether the government is watching South Park. It's what they know that we don't and how long they've been watching. From the very beginning of the series, government agents have appeared during supernatural events with suspicious regularity. They arrive quickly, they seem to know more about what's happening than they should, and they consistently prioritize information control over public safety. This isn't the behavior of agencies responding to random emergencies. This is the behavior of organizations that have been monitoring the situation and are prepared for these types of incidents. Consider the speed and efficiency of government responses to South Park's supernatural events. When aliens land, when demons appear, when reality-bending incidents occur, federal agents are often on the scene within hours. This kind of rapid response requires advanced preparation, existing protocols, and dedicated resources. You don't mobilize federal assets that quickly unless you've been planning for these exact scenarios. The types of agencies that intervene in South Park are also telling. We've seen FBI agents, military special forces, CDC personnel, and various unnamed federal organizations. But perhaps most significantly, we've seen agencies that seem to specialize in supernatural phenomena. These aren't general-purpose federal agents learning about the paranormal for the first time. These are specialists who clearly have experience dealing with otherworldly events. The government's approach to South Park's incidents follows a consistent pattern: contain, control information, and cover up. They rarely seem surprised by supernatural events, and they always have contingency plans ready. This suggests that the government doesn't just know about South Park's unusual properties. They've been studying and preparing for them for some time. But why would the federal government be so interested in one small Colorado town? The most obvious explanation is that South Park serves as some kind of testing ground or monitoring station. If the town really does exist at a dimensional nexus or on land with unusual properties, it would be invaluable for studying supernatural phenomena, testing human responses to extraordinary stimuli, and developing countermeasures for otherworldly threats. The town's isolation makes it perfect for this kind of research. South Park is remote enough that incidents can be contained and covered up relatively easily, but it's still accessible enough for government personnel to maintain a presence. The population is small enough to monitor and control, but large enough to provide meaningful data about human responses to supernatural events. There's also evidence that the government may have been involved in South Park's development from the beginning. The town's infrastructure, its selection as a location for various facilities, and the types of people who have settled there all suggest careful planning rather than organic growth. If the government identified South Park's unusual properties early on, they might have encouraged development there specifically to create a controlled environment for studying supernatural phenomena. The relationship between South Park's residents and government agencies is complex. While the agents often seem antagonistic, they rarely cause lasting harm to the townspeople. Instead, they seem focused on gathering information and maintaining secrecy. This suggests that the residents are seen as valuable assets rather than threats. They're test subjects or unwitting participants in a larger study. Randy Marsh's role as the town geologist takes on new significance when viewed through this lens. Geologists are often the first to detect unusual underground activity, seismic anomalies, and changes in local geological structures. If the government is monitoring South Park for supernatural activity, having a geologist on the ground would be essential for early warning and data collection. Randy's frequent interactions with government agents might not be coincidental. He might be an official or unofficial government asset. The government's treatment of South Park's children is particularly interesting. Despite being regularly involved in supernatural incidents, the boys are rarely subjected to extensive government questioning or detention. Government agents seem to accept that the children will be involved in these events and focus on damage control rather than prevention. This suggests that the government understands something about South Park that makes the children's involvement inevitable or even necessary. The cover-up operations following supernatural incidents are remarkably sophisticated. Memory modification, media manipulation, and evidence removal happen quickly and efficiently. This level of organization requires dedicated resources and extensive planning. The government clearly has protocols in place specifically for South Park incidents, suggesting they've been dealing with these situations for years. Some of the more advanced theories suggest that the government isn't just monitoring South Park. They're actively facilitating some of the supernatural events that occur there. If South Park serves as a testing ground for studying human responses to otherworldly phenomena, then controlled exposure to supernatural events would provide valuable research data. The government might be allowing or even orchestrating certain incidents to study their effects. The military presence around South Park is also significant. We've seen evidence of underground facilities, secret installations, and military exercises in the area. If South Park really does sit on a dimensional nexus, the military implications would be enormous. The ability to access other dimensions could revolutionize warfare, intelligence gathering, and defense strategies. International governments may also be aware of South Park's significance. The town has experienced visits from foreign agents, international conspiracies, and global supernatural events. If South Park's properties are known to other governments, it could be a source of international tension and competition. The U.S. government's protective stance towards South Park might be driven by national security concerns rather than just scientific curiosity. The long-term implications of the government's interest in South Park are staggering. If they've been studying the town's supernatural properties for decades, they may have developed technologies, strategies, and knowledge that fundamentally change humanity's relationship with otherworldly forces. South Park might not just be a small town with weird things happening. It might be ground zero for humanity's preparation for cosmic-level challenges. The government's continued involvement in South Park suggests that whatever they're studying there is far from complete. The ongoing monitoring, the repeated interventions, and the sustained resource allocation all indicate that South Park remains vitally important to national interests. And if that's true, then the weirdest thing about South Park might not be the supernatural events themselves, but the fact that the government seems to consider them normal. Of all the genetically modified experiments to emerge from South Park's bizarre landscape, none is quite as enigmatic as Towley. On the surface, he's a talking towel with a serious substance abuse problem and a tendency to offer unhelpful advice at the worst possible moments. But when you start examining Towley's origins, his capabilities, and his connections to various government and alien technologies, a very different picture emerges. What if Towley isn't just a failed experiment, but actually one of the most sophisticated pieces of alien technology ever created? Let's start with what we know about Towley's creation. He was genetically engineered by a secret government facility as part of a military project. The official story is that he was designed to be the ultimate Towel, absorbent, durable, and capable of independent operation. But the government doesn't typically spend millions of dollars developing sentient household items unless there's a military application involved. So what was Towley really designed to do? The most obvious explanation is that Towley was created as a surveillance device. Think about it. What has better access to private spaces than a towel? Towels are present in bathrooms, locker rooms, bedrooms, and other intimate spaces where people let their guard down. A sentient towel that could observe, record, and report on human behavior would be the perfect espionage tool. Towley's apparent uselessness might actually be an incredibly sophisticated cover story. But Towley's creation story has some interesting gaps. The government facility that created him had access to genetic modification technology that was far ahead of anything publicly available at the time. They were able to create a fully sentient, talking textile with complex personality traits and decision-making capabilities. This suggests that they had access to technological resources that went beyond normal military research and development. This is where the alien connection becomes relevant. Throughout South Park's run, we've seen numerous instances of alien technology being studied, reverse-engineered, and weaponized by government agencies. The visitors from other planets often leave behind advanced devices that human scientists attempt to understand and replicate. What if Towley wasn't created using purely human technology, but was actually based on alien biotechnology? The aliens who frequently visit South Park have demonstrated the ability to create sophisticated organic technology, living machines that can think, adapt, and operate independently. If government scientists had access to alien biotechnology samples, they might have attempted to reverse engineer this technology for military purposes. Towley could be the result of these experiments, a hybrid of human genetic modification techniques and alien biotechnology. This would explain some of Towley's more unusual characteristics. His ability to get high off various substances might not be a design flaw, but actually a sophisticated chemical analysis system. When Towley smokes marijuana, drinks alcohol, or experiments with other drugs, he might be analyzing their chemical composition and effects for scientific purposes. His apparent addiction could actually be a cover for ongoing chemical research. Towley's relationship with government agencies is also suspicious. Despite being a supposedly failed experiment, he maintains contact with various government organizations. He's been recruited for special missions, consulted on technological problems, and treated as a valuable asset rather than a discarded prototype. This suggests that Towley's apparent failure might be intentional misdirection designed to hide his true capabilities. The timing of Towley's appearances in South Park is also noteworthy. He tends to show up during episodes involving alien technology, government conspiracies, or advanced scientific phenomena. This could be coincidence, but it might also suggest that Towley is actively monitoring these situations and reporting back to his handlers. His seemingly random appearances might actually be carefully planned surveillance operations. Towley's advice, while often seemingly unhelpful, sometimes contains remarkably accurate information about complex situations, effective at achieving their goals. Their timing is also suspicious. The crab people revealed themselves during a period when South Park was experiencing increased supernatural activity and government attention. This could be coincidence, but might also suggest that they've been waiting for the right moment to begin the next phase of their plan. They may have been monitoring surface events and decided that the current chaos provides perfect cover for their operations. The fact that the crab people have remained hidden from government detection is particularly impressive, given the level of surveillance and monitoring that government agencies maintain around South Park. The crab people's ability to remain undetected suggests either advanced stealth technology or the ability to operate in ways that human detection systems can't perceive. Their long-term goals remain unclear, but the evidence suggests they're not interested in simple conquest or destruction. Instead, they seem to be working towards some form of integration or coexistence with human society. This could be because they need human cooperation for their own survival, or because they have plans that require human participation. The crab people represent a type of threat that human society is particularly vulnerable to. Unlike obvious military threats that can be met with force, the crab people's infiltration strategy attacks the foundations of human culture and society. By the time their influence is detected, it may already be too late to counter their effects. Perhaps most disturbing is the possibility that the crab people we've seen are just the beginning. If they're part of a larger extraterrestrial civilization, then the underground society beneath South Park might be just an advance outpost for a much larger invasion force. The patient, methodical approach they've taken suggests they're not acting alone, but are part of a coordinated effort that spans multiple worlds or dimensions. The crab people's presence beneath South Park raises fundamental questions about humanity's place in the cosmic order and whether we're truly in control of our own planet. When Man-Bear-Pig first appeared in South Park, it seemed like nothing more than Al Gore's delusional obsession, a ridiculous creature that existed only in the imagination of a desperate former politician trying to remain relevant. But as the series progressed, and Man-Bear-Pig evolved from punchline to genuine threat, something remarkable happened. What started as a joke about climate change denial became one of the most profound statements about prophecy, environmental destruction, and humanity's relationship with cosmic forces that South Park has ever produced. The transformation of Man-Bear-Pig from comedy to crisis wasn't just a change in storytelling approach. It was a revelation about the true nature of environmental threats in the South Park universe. When Man-Bear-Pig returned as a real and terrifying presence, it forced us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about Al Gore's warnings. If Man-Bear-Pig was real, then what did that say about Gore's role in trying to warn humanity about its existence? The most compelling theory about Al Gore and Man-Bear-Pig is that Gore wasn't chosen randomly to be the creature's herald. In many mythological traditions, prophets and warnings come through unlikely messengers, people who are dismissed, ridiculed, or ignored by mainstream society. Gore's status as a figure of mockery in popular culture made him the perfect vessel for a message that humanity wasn't ready to hear. Consider the timing of Gore's obsession with Man-Bear-Pig. His warnings began after his political career had effectively ended, when he had supposedly moved on to environmental activism. But what if his environmental work brought him into contact with something far more serious than conventional climate change? What if his research into global warming revealed evidence of supernatural environmental threats that mainstream science couldn't explain or accept? The connection between Man-Bear-Pig and climate change isn't just metaphorical. It's fundamental to understanding the creature's true nature. Man-Bear-Pig doesn't just represent the consequences of environmental destruction. It might actually be a supernatural entity that feeds on environmental chaos. As human activity destabilizes natural systems, it creates the conditions that allow Man-Bear-Pig to manifest and grow stronger. This would explain why Man-Bear-Pig became more powerful and more real as environmental problems worsened. The creature isn't just a symbol of climate change. It's a parasitic entity that draws strength from ecological destruction. The more damage humans do to the environment, the more physical presence Man-Bear-Pig gains in our reality. Gore's role as Man-Bear-Pig's prophet takes on new significance when viewed through this lens. His environmental activism wasn't just about preventing climate change. It was about preventing the conditions that would allow Man-Bear-Pig to fully manifest. Every warning about carbon emissions, deforestation, and pollution was actually a warning about feeding a cosmic entity that threatens humanity's survival. The supernatural aspects of Man-Bear-Pig extend beyond its relationship with environmental destruction. The creature demonstrates abilities that defy natural biology. It can appear and disappear. It seems to exist partially outside normal physical laws, and it has knowledge and intelligence that exceed what any natural creature should possess. These characteristics suggest that man-bear-pig is not just an environmental consequence, but a cosmic force that uses environmental destruction as a gateway into our reality. Some theories suggest that man-bear-pig is actually an ancient entity that has been dormant for centuries, waiting for humanity to create the right conditions for its return. Historical records of similar creatures appearing during periods of environmental catastrophe could support this theory. If man-bear-pig represents a recurring cosmic threat that emerges whenever civilizations push their environments beyond sustainable limits, then Gore's warnings take on apocalyptic significance. The psychological aspects of man-bear-pig's manifestation are also important to consider. The creature seems to feed not just on environmental destruction, but on humanity's denial and ignorance about environmental threats. The more people refuse to acknowledge environmental problems, the stronger man-bear-pig becomes. This creates a feedback loop where denial of environmental issues literally empowers the very threats that denial seeks to avoid. Gore's initial portrayal as delusional might have been man-bear-pig's own influence at work. If the creature has the ability to manipulate perception and memory, it could have been ensuring that Gore's warnings were dismissed and ridiculed. By making Gore appear crazy, man-bear-pig guaranteed that its warnings would be ignored, allowing environmental destruction to continue unchecked. The deal that South Park's residents made with man-bear-pig reveals another layer of the creature's cosmic significance. Man-bear-pig didn't just want to destroy humanity. It wanted to be acknowledged, worshipped, and fed. This suggests that man-bear-pig is part of a larger cosmic hierarchy of entities that require human recognition and environmental destruction to maintain their power. The intergenerational nature of the deal with man-bear-pig is particularly disturbing. The agreement passed the consequences of environmental destruction to future generations, which mirrors how real environmental problems work. This suggests that man-bear-pig operates according to cosmic laws that govern long-term consequences and intergenerational responsibility. Al Gore's evolution from laughingstock to reluctant hero parallels humanity's own journey from climate denial to climate awareness. But in the South Park universe, this awareness came too late to prevent man-bear-pig from gaining significant power. The creature's manifestation serves as a warning about what happens when environmental prophecies are ignored until they become environmental realities. The cosmic implications of man-bear-pig extend beyond environmental issues. If entities like man-bear-pig exist and can be empowered by human behavior, it suggests that humanity's actions have consequences that reach into supernatural realms. Our treatment of the environment isn't just affecting the physical world. It's affecting the cosmic balance between order and chaos. Man-bear-pig's presence in South Park, a town that serves as a nexus for supernatural activity, isn't coincidental. The creature may have been drawn to South Park specifically because the town's unique properties make it easier for cosmic entities to manifest. Gore's warnings about man-bear-pig weren't just about environmental protection. They were about preventing a cosmic catastrophe that could reshape reality itself. The Imagination Land trilogy stands as one of South Park's most ambitious storylines. But beneath its epic scope and creative spectacle lies a concept that's far more profound and disturbing than it initially appears. What if imagination isn't just a human cognitive function, but actually a force that creates alternate dimensions populated by living, breathing entities? What if every story ever told, every character ever conceived, exists somewhere in a vast multiverse of imagination? And most importantly, what if the government has known about this all along? The basic premise of Imagination Land seems straightforward enough. There's a place where all imaginary characters live together, and it's under attack by evil fictional entities. But when you start examining the mechanics of how Imagination Land operates, the implications become staggering. The realm isn't just a collection of stories. It's a functional reality with its own physics, geography, and political systems. Characters from different fictional universes coexist and interact, suggesting that imagination creates actual living beings rather than just abstract concepts. This raises fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness and reality. If imaginary characters are truly alive and aware in imagination land, then every act of creative imagination is essentially an act of creation on par with bringing life into existence. Writers, filmmakers, and storytellers aren't just entertaining audiences. They're literally creating new forms of consciousness and populating alternate dimensions with living beings. The government's involvement in imagination land is particularly revealing. They don't treat it as a curiosity or a fantasy. They treat it as a matter of national security requiring immediate military intervention. This suggests that the government has been aware of Imagination Land's existence for some time and understands its strategic importance. If imagination can create actual realities, then controlling or influencing those realities would be a major priority for any intelligence agency. Consider the military implications of Imagination Land. If fictional characters and scenarios can become real through the power of imagination, then psychological warfare takes on entirely new dimensions. Imagine being able to deploy actual monsters from horror stories, or to create ideal soldiers based on fictional heroes. The ability to weaponize imagination would revolutionize warfare and give whoever controls it an almost insurmountable advantage. The portal between our reality and imagination land also raises questions about the permeability of dimensional boundaries. If imagination can create doorways between worlds, then other methods might exist for crossing between realities. This could explain some of South Park's more inexplicable supernatural events. There might be cases of entities or influences crossing over from other dimensions created by human imagination. The attack on Imagination Land by evil imaginary characters represents something more than just a conflict between good and evil fictional entities. It might actually be a manifestation of humanity's collective psychological state. As real-world conditions become more chaotic and fearful, the evil characters in Imagination Land gain power and influence. The barrier between good and evil in imagination might reflect the balance between hope and despair in human consciousness. This psychological connection between reality and imagination land suggests that controlling human emotions and thoughts could directly affect the balance of power in the imaginary realm. If governments or other organizations could manipulate public mood and imagination, they could potentially influence the outcome of conflicts in imagination land. This adds a new layer to concepts like propaganda and media manipulation. They're not just influencing human behavior, they're potentially affecting the balance of power in alternate dimensions. The role of children in accessing imagination land is also significant. Children seem to have a more natural connection to the imaginary realm, possibly because their minds are more open to possibilities that adults have learned to dismiss as impossible. This suggests that imagination might be a natural human ability that becomes suppressed or weakened through socialization and education. What we call growing up might actually be the process of losing our connection to alternate realities. The fact that Kyle can be physically transported to Imagination Land indicates that the boundary between imagination and reality is more fluid than most people believe. If individuals can cross between worlds under the right circumstances, then the distinction between what's real and what's imaginary becomes largely meaningless. Everything that can be imagined might be equally real, just existing in different dimensional spaces. The terrorist attack that opens the Imagination Land trilogy isn't just a plot device. It's a statement about how real-world trauma affects the collective imagination. When horrible things happen in reality, they create corresponding disturbances in the realm of imagination. The terrorists aren't just attacking the physical world. They're attacking humanity's ability to dream, hope, and imagine better possibilities. The government's attempts to control and contain Imagination Land reflect real-world concerns about information control and narrative management. If imagination has the power to create alternate realities, then controlling what people imagine becomes a matter of cosmic importance. Censorship, media manipulation, and thought control aren't just about social control. They're about controlling the very fabric of reality itself. The resolution of the imagination land crisis, where imagination is restored and the barriers between good and evil are reestablished, suggests that there are cosmic forces at work maintaining the balance between different types of imagination. This implies that creativity and imagination aren't just human activities. They're part of a larger cosmic system that requires maintenance and protection. Perhaps most disturbing is the implication that if imagination can create realities, then the act of imagining something terrible might actually bring it into existence somewhere. Every horror story, every nightmare, every fearful thought might be creating actual suffering in alternate dimensions. This would make imagination not just a creative force, but a moral responsibility of staggering proportions. The Imagination Land trilogy ultimately suggests that South Park exists in a universe where consciousness and reality are far more interconnected than most people realize, and where the power of imagination carries consequences that extend far beyond entertainment. Satan's portrayal in South Park is one of the show's most fascinating character developments, transforming from a stereotypical evil overlord into a surprisingly sympathetic figure struggling with personal relationships and self-esteem issues. But this dramatic character evolution might be more than just clever writing. It might actually reveal something profound about Satan's true role in the cosmic order and his specific connection to South Park itself. Traditional depictions of Satan focus on his role as the embodiment of evil, the tempter of humanity, and the ruler of hell. But South Park's Satan is different. He's insecure, relationship-focused, and often more moral than many of the show's human characters. This isn't just comedy, subverting expectations. This might be showing us Satan's actual nature once you strip away centuries of religious propaganda and mythological exaggeration. Consider Satan's relationship patterns throughout the series. His romantic entanglements consistently involve him being manipulated, abused, or taken advantage of by partners who are far more selfish and destructive than he is. Saddam Hussein treats Satan terribly. Chris exploits his kindness, and various other partners seem to recognize Satan as someone who can be easily manipulated. This pattern suggests that Satan's fundamental nature is actually quite different from his reputation. The most revealing aspect of Satan's character is his genuine desire to help people and do the right thing. When people summon him or ask for his assistance, he often provides thoughtful, moral guidance rather than tempting them toward evil. His advice is typically focused on personal growth, healthy relationships, and making ethical choices. This is the complete opposite of what traditional demonology would suggest about Satan's interactions with humans. Satan's role in South Park's supernatural ecosystem appears to be more complex than simple evil antagonist. He seems to serve as a kind of cosmic therapist, helping both humans and supernatural entities work through their personal problems and moral dilemmas. Rather than corrupting people, he's often the voice of reason, trying to guide them toward better decisions. This suggests that his traditional reputation as the source of evil might be a fundamental misunderstanding of his actual function. The cosmic balance theory provides a framework for understanding Satan's true role. In many mythological systems, opposing forces aren't meant to destroy each other, but to maintain balance and stability in the universe. Satan might not be the enemy of good, but rather the necessary counterweight that allows good to exist and have meaning. Without the possibility of evil, moral choices become meaningless. Satan's presence might be what makes human moral development possible. Satan's residence in hell takes on new significance when viewed through this lens. Hell might not be a place of punishment, but rather a cosmic recycling center where souls are processed, refined, and given opportunities for growth and redemption. Satan's role as ruler of hell might be more like a cosmic social worker, helping damaged souls work through their issues and eventually return to the cosmic community. This would explain why Satan seems more interested in therapy and relationship advice than in corruption and damnation. He's not trying to damn souls. He's trying to heal them. The traditional image of hell as eternal punishment might be propaganda designed to hide the fact that hell is actually a rehabilitation system that threatens the power structures that benefit from human suffering and ignorance. Satan's interactions with religious figures in South Park support this theory. When he encounters Jesus, their relationship is more like professional colleagues with different specializations rather than eternal enemies. They seem to respect each other's roles in the cosmic system, suggesting that they're working toward the same ultimate goals through different methods. The government's apparent awareness of Satan's presence in South Park, combined with their lack of serious attempts to intervene, suggests that Satan's activities are either sanctioned or considered beneficial to national interests. If Satan were actually promoting evil and chaos, government agencies would presumably take action against him. Their tolerance suggests that Satan's work in South Park serves purposes that align with maintaining social stability. Satan's parties and social gatherings in hell reveal another aspect of his character that contradicts traditional depictions. Hell, as Satan runs it, appears to be a vibrant community where beings from different realms can interact freely. This suggests that Satan is actually promoting understanding and cooperation between different types of consciousness, rather than sowing division and hatred. The timing of Satan's appearances in South Park often coincides with periods when the town faces moral or ethical crises. Rather than taking advantage of these situations to promote evil, Satan typically appears to offer guidance and support to help people make better choices. This pattern suggests that Satan actively monitors human welfare and intervenes when people need moral guidance the most. Satan's personal struggles with self-esteem and relationships might also serve a larger purpose. By demonstrating that even cosmic entities struggle with personal growth and emotional development, Satan provides a model for how to deal with personal problems constructively. His willingness to be vulnerable and seek help shows humans that it's okay to admit weakness and ask for support. The most radical interpretation of Satan's role is that he might actually be humanity's protector rather than its enemy. If there are cosmic forces that genuinely threaten human welfare, entities that want to exploit, enslave, or destroy humanity, Satan might be positioned as a guardian who prevents these forces from gaining access to Earth. His fearsome reputation could be a form of cosmic camouflage that allows him to operate as humanity's defender without attracting attention from more dangerous entities. Satan's presence in South Park, a town that attracts supernatural attention from across the cosmos, might not be coincidental. He could be specifically stationed there to monitor and manage the various otherworldly forces that are drawn to the town's unique properties. Rather than being a threat to South Park's residents, Satan might be the reason they're able to survive their constant encounters with cosmic-level dangers. This reinterpretation of Satan's role suggests that much of what humanity believes about good and evil, divine and infernal, might be fundamentally wrong, and that the real cosmic order operates according to principles that are far more complex and compassionate than traditional religious teachings suggest. When the member berries first appear in South Park, they seemed like a clever commentary on nostalgia culture and the way people romanticize the past. These small, grape-like creatures that whispered fond memories of bygone eras appear to be nothing more than a satirical take on how nostalgia is packaged and sold to consumers. But as their storyline developed, something much more sinister emerged. What if the member berries aren't just a metaphor for manipulative nostalgia, but actually represent one of the most sophisticated forms of mind control ever depicted in the series? The member berries' method of operation is insidiously simple. They whisper pleasant memories and nostalgic thoughts that make people feel good about the past, while simultaneously making them dissatisfied with the present. This isn't random reminiscence. This is targeted psychological manipulation designed to alter people's perceptions of reality and their decision-making processes. The berries don't just trigger memories. They actively shape which memories people focus on and how those memories are interpreted. The most disturbing aspect of the member berries is their apparent intelligence and coordination. They don't just randomly spout nostalgic phrases. They seem to understand their targets and tailor their messages accordingly. This suggests that the member berries are either sentient beings with their own agenda or sophisticated tools being controlled by some external intelligence. Either possibility has frightening implications for human autonomy and free will. The berries' influence on political processes reveals the true scope of their power. They don't just make people nostalgic for old movies and TV shows. They actively influence voting patterns and political beliefs by making people long for imagined golden ages that never actually existed. By triggering nostalgic feelings associated with specific time periods, the member berries can make people support political candidates and policies that promise to restore those supposedly better times. This connects to a broader theory about information warfare and reality manipulation. If the member berries represent an advanced form of propaganda, then their creators understand something fundamental about human psychology that goes beyond conventional marketing and political messaging. They've discovered how to directly influence the neurochemical processes associated with memory and emotion, essentially hacking the human brain at a biological level. The timing of the member berries' appearance is significant. They emerged during a period of increased political polarization and social media manipulation, suggesting that they might be either a response to or a tool of larger information warfare campaigns. If external forces wanted to influence human society, deploying biological agents that could directly alter thought patterns would be far more effective than traditional propaganda methods. The berries' ability to spread their influence suggests they might operate more like a virus than a simple product. People who consume member berries don't just experience nostalgic feelings. They become carriers who spread those same nostalgic ideas to others. This viral propagation method could allow a relatively small initial deployment to eventually influence entire populations, making the member berries a remarkably efficient tool for mass psychological manipulation. The member berries' connection to specific cultural references isn't random, it's strategic. By focusing on shared cultural touchstones like Star Wars and classic television shows, the berries tap into collective memories that transcend individual experience. This allows them to influence people who might not have personal memories of the reference time periods, but who have absorbed cultural narratives about those eras through media exposure. The most sinister possibility is that the member berries are part of a larger system designed to make people psychologically dependent on external sources for their emotional well-being. By making people feel that the present is inadequate compared to an idealized past, the berries create a constant state of dissatisfaction that can only be temporarily relieved by consuming more nostalgic content. This creates a feedback loop that keeps people emotionally dependent on the very system that's manipulating them. The berries' apparent spontaneous generation raises questions about their origin. They seem to appear naturally, but their sophisticated understanding of human psychology suggests artificial creation. This could indicate that they're the product of advanced biotechnology, living organisms that have been genetically engineered to produce specific psychological effects in humans. If this is the case, then the member berries represent a new category of biological weapon designed for cognitive rather than physical warfare. The resistance to member berry influence seems to require conscious effort and critical thinking skills. Characters who are aware of the berries' manipulative nature can resist their effects, but this resistance requires constant vigilance. This suggests that the berries' power lies not in their ability to override human consciousness, but in their ability to exploit natural psychological vulnerabilities that most people aren't aware they possess. The member berries' ultimate goals remain unclear, but their effects consistently involve making people more passive, more nostalgic, and less engaged with present-day problems. If this is intentional, then the berries might be part of a strategy to pacify human populations and reduce their ability to resist larger social or political changes. By keeping people focused on imagined golden ages of the past, the berries prevent them from taking action to improve present conditions. The global spread of member berry influence suggests that they're not just a local South Park phenomenon, but part of a worldwide operation. This scale of deployment would require significant resources and coordination, indicating that whoever or whatever is behind the member berries has access to advanced technology and global distribution networks. Perhaps most disturbing is the possibility that the member berries represent just one tool in a larger arsenal of biological and psychological manipulation techniques. If they can create organisms that influence memory and emotion, what other aspects of human consciousness might be subject to similar manipulation? The member berries could be a test case for more advanced forms of cognitive control that could fundamentally alter human society and individual autonomy. The member berries serve as a warning about the dangers of surrendering critical thinking to emotional manipulation, regardless of how pleasant that manipulation might feel in the moment. South Park's relationship with time and reality has always been complicated, but when you start mapping out all the temporal anomalies, alternate timelines, and dimensional inconsistencies that have occurred throughout the series, a fascinating picture emerges. What if South Park doesn't exist in a single, linear timeline, but instead serves as a nexus point where multiple timelines and parallel dimensions intersect? This would explain not just the show's approach to continuity, but also some of its most bizarre and seemingly contradictory elements. The evidence for temporal instability in South Park is extensive. Characters have traveled through time, encountered alternate versions of themselves, and experienced events that seem to reset or change retroactively. But these aren't just isolated incidents. They're part of a pattern that suggests South Park exists in a state of temporal flux that allows for constant reality revision and timeline adjustment. Consider how the show handles major character deaths and resurrections. Kenny's repeated deaths and returns are the most obvious example, but other characters have also died and returned with little explanation. These aren't just cases of death being undone. They're evidence that South Park exists in a reality where death itself is subject to temporal revision. When someone dies in one timeline, they can simply continue existing in a parallel timeline that becomes the new primary reality. The show's famous disregard for continuity might not be carelessness or creative convenience, but actually an accurate representation of how reality works in a temporally unstable environment. In a world where timelines frequently branch, merge, and override each other, maintaining strict continuity would be impossible. Characters would naturally have conflicting memories and experiences because they're constantly moving between slightly different versions of reality. This temporal instability could explain some of South Park's more inexplicable supernatural events. When reality is already in flux, it becomes much easier for otherworldly forces to manifest and alter local conditions. Aliens, demons, and other supernatural entities might be drawn to South Park specifically because its temporal instability makes it easier for them to cross between dimensions and establish a presence in our reality. The government's interest in South Park takes on new significance when viewed through this lens. If the town serves as a temporal nexus point, it would be incredibly valuable for research into time travel, alternate history, and reality manipulation. Government agencies might not just be responding to supernatural incidents. They might be actively studying South Park's temporal properties to develop new technologies and strategic capabilities. Time travel episodes in South Park often result in changes that seem to stick, but only partially. Characters will remember events that happened in previous timelines, or situations will be altered in ways that don't quite make sense if you assume linear causality. This suggests that timeline changes in South Park don't completely override previous realities, but instead create hybrid timelines that contain elements from multiple alternate histories. The boys' frequent encounters with their future selves provide another clue about South Park's temporal nature. These meetings often result in paradoxes that should theoretically prevent the timelines from existing, but somehow the reality around South Park adapts to accommodate these impossibilities. This suggests that the town exists in a kind of temporal bubble where normal causality rules don't apply. Parallel versions of characters appearing in South Park might not be visitors from alternate dimensions, but actually simultaneous manifestations of the same people existing across multiple timelines. When reality is unstable enough, different versions of the same person could theoretically exist in the same space-time location, leading to the kind of identity confusion and character duplication that South Park occasionally explores. The show's self-aware moments, where characters acknowledge their fictional nature or reference previous episodes in ways that break the fourth wall, could be evidence of temporal consciousness bleeding through from other realities. If South Park exists at the intersection of multiple timelines, including ones where the characters are aware they're fictional, then occasional moments of meta-awareness would be natural consequences of this dimensional overlap. Weather and seasonal anomalies in South Park might also be connected to temporal instability. When multiple timelines exist simultaneously, the physical environment would naturally experience conflicting influences from different temporal periods. This could explain why South Park experiences impossible weather patterns, seasonal shifts that don't follow normal cycles, and environmental changes that seem to defy natural laws. The rapid pace of social and technological change in South Park could be another symptom of temporal acceleration. When multiple timelines are compressed into a single location, decades of cultural evolution might occur within months or years. This would explain how South Park manages to stay current with rapidly changing real-world events while maintaining its core character relationships and town structure. Memory inconsistencies among South Park residents might not be signs of poor writing or character development, but actual symptoms of existing in a temporally unstable environment. When reality is constantly shifting between different timeline configurations, it will be natural for people to have conflicting memories about past events. Some characters might remember events from alternate timelines that are no longer the primary reality. The psychological effects of living in a temporally unstable environment would be significant. Characters in South Park often display unusual resilience to trauma, rapid adaptation to bizarre situations, and an almost supernatural ability to bounce back from devastating events. These characteristics might be evolutionary adaptations that allow people to function normally despite living in a reality where fundamental aspects of existence are constantly changing. Educational and developmental processes in South Park also seem to operate differently than in normal reality. Children learn and mature at inconsistent rates. Adults frequently behave like children, and characters seem to gain and lose knowledge and skills without clear explanation. In a temporally unstable environment, personal growth and education might follow nonlinear patterns that reflect the underlying chaos of reality itself. The implications of South Park existing as a temporal nexus extend far beyond the town itself. If South Park serves as a focal point where multiple timelines intersect, then events that occur there might have consequences that ripple across multiple realities and alternate histories, making the town's seemingly random adventures into cosmic-level incidents with universal significance. As we reach the end of our journey through South Park's hidden mysteries and cosmic conspiracies, we arrive at perhaps the most mind-bending theory of all: the idea that the residents of South Park are not just fictional characters in a television show, but are actually aware of their fictional nature and actively participate in the creation of their own narrative reality. This meta-theory doesn't just explain some of the show's more inexplicable elements. It suggests that South Park operates according to rules that transcend traditional storytelling and venture into genuine philosophical territory about the nature of consciousness and reality itself. The evidence for South Park's meta-awareness is abundant once you start looking for it. Characters regularly break the fourth wall, reference their own show, acknowledge episode numbers and seasons, and demonstrate knowledge about television production that they shouldn't possess. But this goes beyond simple comedy breaking the fourth wall for laughs. There's a consistency and sophistication to these meta moments that suggests something deeper is happening. Consider how often South Park characters discuss their own character development, plot arcs, and narrative functions. They complain about being written inconsistently. They reference their own character growth over previous episodes, and they sometimes even negotiate with unseen forces about their roles in upcoming storylines. This isn't just characters being self-aware. This is characters actively participating in the creative process of their own existence. The show's remarkable ability to respond to current events with episodes that air within days of real-world incidents suggests that the South Park universe operates according to accelerated time that allows for rapid narrative adaptation. But what if this isn't just production efficiency? What if the characters themselves are somehow aware of real-world events and are collaborating with their creators to produce timely commentary? This would explain how South Park manages to be both satirically relevant and narratively coherent despite its impossible production schedule. The residents of South Park display an unusual resilience to trauma and catastrophe that makes more sense if they understand their characters in a comedy show. They bounce back from deaths, disasters, and reality-altering events with remarkable speed because they know these incidents are temporary plot points rather than permanent changes to their existence. This meta-knowledge would serve as a psychological defense mechanism that allows them to function normally despite living in a world of constant chaos. Characters in South Park often seem to have access to information they shouldn't possess based on their supposed roles and backgrounds. They understand complex political situations, reference obscure cultural phenomena, and demonstrate knowledge about topics that extend far beyond their apparent education and experience. This could be explained if they have access to the same information sources as their creators, essentially sharing consciousness with the writers and producers who create their adventures. The show's approach to continuity makes much more sense when viewed through a meta-narrative lens. South Park simultaneously maintains detailed character development over decades, while also treating individual episodes as self-contained units that can reset the status quo. This apparent contradiction resolves if you assume the characters are aware they're in a television show and understand that some changes are permanent character development, while others are temporary plot devices. The government's frequent intervention in South Park's affairs takes on new significance if you consider that government agencies might be aware of the town's fictional nature. Rather than responding to supernatural threats, they might be responding to narrative instabilities that threaten to expose the fictional nature of reality itself. The Men in Black aren't covering up alien visitations. They're maintaining the boundary between fiction and reality. South Park's impact on real-world culture and politics suggests that the fictional realm has genuine influence over actual reality. The show's commentary affects real political discourse. Its characters have become cultural icons, and its storylines have influenced public opinion on major issues. If South Park exists in a state of meta-awareness, then its influence on reality isn't just cultural impact. It's evidence that fictional consciousness can directly affect the real world. The boys' adventures often seem to follow narrative logic rather than realistic causality. Events unfold in ways that serve story purposes rather than following natural consequences, and conflicts resolve through dramatic timing rather than logical progression. This makes perfect sense if the characters understand they're in a narrative structure and actively collaborate to ensure their adventures follow satisfying story arcs. The recurring theme of South Park commenting on media, entertainment, and popular culture gains new depth when viewed as self-reflection rather than external criticism. When South Park critiques television, social media, or entertainment industry practices, it's not just satirizing other media. It's examining its own nature as a piece of entertainment and questioning the relationship between creators, characters, and audiences. The show's longevity and ability to reinvent itself repeatedly could be explained by the characters' active participation in keeping their show relevant and engaging. Rather than being passive subjects of creative decisions, they might be collaborating with their creators to ensure their continued existence and cultural relevance. This would create a feedback loop between fictional consciousness and creative process that transcends traditional author-character relationships. Perhaps most remarkably, South Park's ability to maintain its satirical edge while exploring profound philosophical themes suggests that its meta-awareness extends to understanding its own cultural significance. The show doesn't just comment on society. It understands its role as a commentator and actively works to fulfill that function effectively. This ultimate theory suggests that South Park has achieved something unprecedented in entertainment. a genuine collaboration between fictional consciousness and creative reality that produces content which operates simultaneously as comedy, social commentary, and philosophical exploration. Whether you accept this theory or not, South Park's unique position in popular culture demonstrates that the boundaries between fiction and reality, between creator and creation, and between entertainment and truth are far more fluid than most of us realize. As we drift off to sleep, perhaps we can take comfort in the idea that somewhere out there, in a small mountain town in Colorado, four kids are having adventures that matter not just because they're entertaining, but because they're helping us understand what it means to be conscious, creative, and alive in an increasingly strange and wonderful universe.